We're back. Point and Click Productions in association with Portland Mindfulness Therapy and yours truly, Joe Reinwein, licensed psychologist, present the continuation of the first installment of the vlog-like series about Buddhism, which I'm entitling Buddhism Randomly, in characteristic self-deprecating style, which is a little safer than arrogating authority that I really don't have. I'm a psychologist, I'm not a Buddhist teacher, etc. And to continue, where we left Shakyamuni Buddha, where we left Siddhartha Gautama, soon to become known as Shakyamuni Buddha, the enlightened one, the silent one of the Shakya tribe. He had just had a glorious enlightenment, known in Sanskrit, I think, as Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, meaning complete, perfect enlightenment, as enlightened as a human being can get. Which is to say, he remembered that he had been virtually everybody else, that he was part and parcel of the universe, and that nothing is quite as it appears to be, etc., etc., etc. For me to unpack the Buddha's enlightenment would be a little like a 5-year-old piano player who's just learned to play maybe a Bach minuet, trying to play the Rachmaninoff 3. It's not going to work. But suffice to say, this enlightenment was so profound and so subtle that the next part of the story, according to some accounts, is that the Buddha said, Siddhartha said, oh, I don't think I want to teach this to anybody. This is so subtle. Nobody's going to understand this, and it's going to be a real rotten mess, as we say here in Oregon, a hot mess. And tradition has it that a deva came to him, an angel of some sort. I think they might call it a deva, but a being of compassion came to him and pleaded with him, Lord Buddha, please, please, please teach this Dharma. We need it. We are suffering horribly out here. Please teach this Dharma. Please don't just keep it to yourself. And he said, fine, okay. And he started to systematize something that really can't be systematized. So the Four Noble Truths, life is suffering, there's a cause to the suffering, and that cause is ignorance, but there is cessation of suffering, which is the annihilation of ignorance, and there is an eightfold path, which he then describes: right thought, right speech, right mindfulness, right this, right that, right the other, just guidelines for all aspects of life. And he formulated this in a few different ways, and of course there are a multitude of translations, and we can get into all that to some degree, and I think we will to some degree, I hope, in this series. But where I really wanted to go with this pair of videos that constitute entries 1 and 2, entitled You Are the Buddha, is this is our story. Our story is analogous to that of the Buddha's story, of Shakyamuni Buddha or Siddhartha Gautama's story, that we are all, in a sense, protecting ourselves. We can't blame our parents necessarily, though they may have had something to do with it. They love us, they want to protect us, and they don't want us to go off and become weird monks or something, usually, to leave home. As a side note, I think I botched one detail, is that the prophecy was that either he'd become a great king or he'd become a great monk. And his father did not want the second one, but never mind, I got the basic story. We all have the potential to become either in some way worldly leaders, whether that is as a homemaker and a leader of a very small group of people. For some of us, perhaps just a leader to ourselves. And we all have the capacity to become great spiritual leaders, perhaps to others, or perhaps just to ourselves. We all have these two capacities, and we all, I hope, are born into a somewhat protected situation, one that is in some ways, perhaps, for many of us, idyllic on the surface. For some of us, it's a living hell from day one. Not so common. Usually it's a mixture of the two. But in some ways, we overprotect ourselves. Perhaps our parents overprotect us. That's a judgment. But in any case, there is a tendency for all of us to want to screen out anything bad and to hide our eyes from what we know to be true, which is that there is sickness, and there is old age, and there is death, and that there are ways of working on ourselves, of purifying the mind. And we like to hear no evil, see no evil. We think of these things as evils, the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to, in Shakespeare's words. The 108 annoyances in some Buddhist formulations, in Chinese fanao, the irritations of the brain. They exist, and the one we tend to have the hardest time of all about, the one we struggle with the most, tends to be the one that, I'm going to die. This is a temporary state of affairs, me being here. Not only am I going to die, as I said in my 60-second Buddhism in 60 seconds video, I just went through the Four Noble Truths real quick. The skin's going to keep looking worse. It's not going to tend to get better, especially at my age. And the hair's not going to tend to get better. And the teeth aren't going to tend to get better, although I had mine straightened. Temporary fix, I assure you, because these are going to be, sitting in a pile of ashes at some point. So in the meantime, how do we find meaning and purpose here, is the question. And how do we live well, the perennial question of philosophy. And Buddhism is one way of struggling with this, one way of coming to grips with these questions. And it's not, in my view, it's not the only way. In my view, it's not the way you should follow. In my view, it's just, it's a thing. And here I am telling you about this thing that's been important to me, and that maybe it could possibly be useful to you. A little tiny bit more about you are the Buddha. One great teacher writes that everything about Buddhism is for you personally, the reader of his book. He says, you, the reader, are the reason for Buddhism. All of Buddhism is for you. And it's a really interesting doctrine. It's a really interesting way of talking about things. It's almost like the wonderful Robert De Niro scene in Taxi Driver that's so famous. There's no one else here. Your mouth moved. Are you talking to me? There's no one else here. I mean, look around. There's other people, but you're not them. And you can't see through their eyes, no matter how hard you try. You can only see through the eyes you're seeing through. And as far as you're concerned, I'm just a guy who's out there. And as far as I'm concerned, you're just people who are out there. So from a very practical standpoint, all of Buddhism is for you personally. And there are great teachers who stand by this point and adhere and stick it to you. You are the Buddha. You are Shakyamuni Buddha. You are the only person that matters in this story. Which doesn't sound like that would be a good thing to think. But it turns out that means you have a lot of responsibility should you choose to take it. Now, there are other stories, such as in the Zen literature, there's a nice story where there are two monks traveling. A number of different shenanigans go on. One of the things that attracted me to Buddhism and Zen in particular is how funny the stories are, how much humor there is in the stories, which I never really found to be the case very much in the Bible or in other holy teachings. Zen, for whatever reason, is irreverent, and if you know me, you know that I'm pretty irreverent. So that always grabbed me. And then almost it seemed sometimes nonsensical. But one part of this complex story, I think a little more complex than I'm remembering, the one monk writes Buddha on the other monk's sitting bench. It's, here, please, sit down. And the other monk says, I don't dare sit there. I'm not Buddha. And the first monk who wrote it said, oh, do you still have that? Do you still have that illusion that you're not Buddha? So I'm going to leave it there. This is not something I can tie up nicely with a bow. It's just a thing. That's all I got today. May your life go well.